Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, October 26th, 2020. Another show in the wings here, waiting, ready to get underway. Not that I know anything that we will be discussing today. I mean, Bill has some ideas, and we can always turn to Bill for a morning kickoff idea. And it's usually a good one, and we usually end up on that topic anyway. So we might as well talk about it, right? Kagro in the Morning is live now. That is happening. It's true. The question on Bill's mind this morning, will our own Greg Dworkin, Dem from Connecticut on Twitter, walk out on Kagro X, me, David Waldman, for being asked tough questions and getting all nasty before hitting his head on the Klieg lights? Is that happening too? All right. The answer will shock you. So will the Klieg lights if you hit your head on them and you're standing in a puddle. Anyway. So it could be a wild morning. We never know for sure exactly who's going to walk out on what. That was, I guess, the topic of yesterday's discussion surrounding the airing at last of the 60 Minutes interview between Leslie Stahl and Donald Trump. Of course, Donald Trump blew it all up by releasing portions of the interview, which I guess he had his own people tape. That is, tape the taping of the interview so that he could totally undermine 60 Minutes in their business model and ruin all their ratings by releasing some of the interview early, and I don't think it worked. Everybody kind of wanted to tune in and see what does the regular 60 Minutes edit of this interview look like. And as we discussed last week, there are no circumstances under which raw, unedited tape of Donald Trump does Donald Trump any favors. Like most of us, I mean, you're supposed to be better at this by the time you rise to become president, but like most of us, unedited tape makes you look, unprepared. Yeah, is that how I look when I do this sort of thing? Unprepared, maybe not entirely sure of yourself when you're giving your answers. It rarely does anybody any good, except, I suppose, to add some additional context if there's some question about, where a question or an answer came from and something that was edited out that later seems important. It has its role, but every time that they release the raw tape of an Oval Office interview with Donald Trump, he just looks dumber and more scatterbrained, and I really don't know what he thought he was doing with this one, and I don't know what he thought he was doing walking out of the interview. It looked pretty much like everybody thought it would look when they heard that he had done it, and he's done himself no favors. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it with Greg a little bit. I didn't sit down and watch the 60 Minutes airing. I watched the clips, once again, that were being circulated online. And I don't know. I don't know what he thought he was going to get out of it. He looked like a baby, and everybody kind of figured that's how it was going to look, and that's how it did look. I was a little bit surprised, I guess, by the fact that he couldn't tell the difference between the actual questions that she was asking and the rhetorical, question warm-up, greeting, essentially, that she gave him of are you ready for some tough questions? And I mean, it's a rhetorical question. You don't really have to answer, am I ready for some tough questions? Is it fair that I be asked tough questions? Do I think other people are asked questions just as tough as the ones the thought that he put into this, good morning, how are you? How am I? How am I? How am I compared to you? How am I compared to other people? You never ask other people how they are. You really need to know how I am? What kind of question is that? I don't know. But that upset him a great deal. Obviously, I guess he just needed an excuse to call things off and walk out. But, you would hope that somebody who would become president of the United States would have a better idea of what excuse he might latch on to. But apparently not. And so there you go. I don't know. It's just a bizarro situation. All right. Plenty of other things happening over the weekend as well. Today being Monday, is, I guess, the day set for the final vote on the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. Sunday, they did follow through and have their cloture vote. And so you may recall that afterwards, after a cloture is invoked, there are 30 hours of debate time remaining before the final vote, or up to 30 hours can be used. And Democrats using it last night, holding an all-night session. I'm not really a huge fan of their doing these things and billing them as additional fight against whatever it is they're opposing, and in this case, Barrett's nomination, and calling it sometimes calling it a filibuster, sometimes just calling it protest, sometimes saying we'll fight every minute for you, and there's not much use to it. You could get the 30-hour clock to run just the same with a unanimous consent agreement not to say anything, but they're making use of the floor time. They're making use of the spectacle. There are political implications, of course, for doing that. So I don't begrudge them that, although I do dislike it when they say I'm going to filibuster something and use the 30 hours, a favorite tactic of several senators, and done in the hopes that none of you will understand that there's no filibuster possible in this situation, and whatever. So our educated audience, I think, is over it by now, and we understand what's happening and why the fake thing is happening. It's okay. We can live with it. There are bigger things to worry about. What are we, 9 days out? 8 days out from the election, or election day? I know that's an old-fashioned concept now, and every time I write that down, I realize I have to explain to the youngsters, there used to be a day where we all voted all at once. Yeah, and they called it Election Day, and they had it on Tuesday, and nobody knew why, and that's becoming more and more obsolete. More and more people, of course, voting early, this year in particular because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which the president still doesn't understand or care about. And that's still the overriding issue as far as I'm concerned. And I think probably the same goes for Greg as well. And he'll probably come on and tell you just the same. I stayed off of Twitter more than usual over the weekend, so I'm pleased with the way the weekend went. I didn't see every little foible and every little ridiculous thing that happened. So I am unsure as to whether they happened at all or whether I just missed them. And my assumption is that the Twitter micro-universe churned on just as always. And I've missed a number of micro crises. And I'm happy to have done it. Maybe Greg will be able to tell me what some of them are. Or maybe they really didn't happen. We all had a great weekend. It might be the last of the warmish weekends here on the East Coast for some time. Anyway, good morning, Greg. How are you today?
Good morning. So the Borat movie clips were circulating, right, and everybody got a chance to see, including on Saturday Night Live, what Rudy was up to. And, it was pretty gross.
Oh, okay. So it didn't look that good?
Well, you could explain it any way you want to, but typically you don't lie in your bed to fix your pants.
That's
or
not
tuck in your shirt, or
that's not where I do
whatever. So there was that, but a lot of other things happen too. They come, they go, because in the 15-second news cycle, these things occur. Yes, there was the 60 Minutes piece. You have to assume Trump was trying to set it up so he could show that he's in charge of the press, because everything that around his life is done is constructed to make it look like he's in charge of the universe. And people around him, for some reason, I guess because they want to keep their jobs or have this job in the first place, which is the part I have trouble figuring out, want to adhere to that and toe that line. And so it had to be structured so that if Trump didn't like the interview, he could walk out, and they were taping it so they could show it to everybody. And, of course, it backfired like just about everything else he does. And my only assumption when he does something really stupid like take a joyride with Secret Service people from the hospital at Walter Reed, things like that.
Yes.
My only assumption is that this was Jared's idea. Everything that is like a bad idea that like totally backfires is Jared's idea.
It really does feel that way. Or they're doing a great job in one thing and one thing only, which is blaming Jared for everything.
Well, there was a great Rachel Vindman tweet
Both can be true, of course. Yes.
Who's the wife of Alexander Vindman, who
Right.
has a bone to pick with these people.
She's been very active lately.
Said 23,000 plus Americans have had a vastly different experience, and that doesn't take into account those who are still facing debilitating health issues after recovering. So I cannot wait until Jared is in jail. And I think she speaks for America.
Yes. Right. I'll be very excited when that happens. And, it's a family tradition for them.
It is. So let's start with a little bit of poetry here, from Lord John Wharton, who refers, of course, to Donald Trump years in advance.
Yes.
Who said, sealed with a curse as sharp as a knife, doomed is your soul and damned is your life. And so, what's going on here? Well, let me give you a picture of Trump losing. Right, for those of you who are nervous and biting your fingernails to the point where you're down to your second knuckle, let me give you one Dave Wasserman, known as Redistrict on Twitter. He works for the Cook Political Report and a couple other places. And his signature call out when he sees an election and figures, okay, we have enough information and so we can make that call, because that's what he does. He'll write, I've seen enough. This guy won. That's what he writes.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I remember.
And it's kind of cute. It's this year's, tagline. So late last night, he wrote, a few days out, the picture of the race is pretty clear. Biden's lead, 52 to 43, is larger and more stable than Clinton's in 16. And as an aside, because we're at the point where Comey wrote his letter and Clinton's lead started to dissolve, all the people who were writing in and saying, yes, but in 2016, Clinton led by, have all of a sudden shut up because, there's nothing to do. Clinton's lead is now smaller.
Okay.
Figuring in that, the election was 5 days later then, so you have to adjust. But no, you can't compare it to 16. So Biden's lead is larger and more stable than Clinton's in 16.
Okay.
Far fewer undecided third-party voters than in 16. And it's a far more stable lead. It didn't bounce all over the place the way Clinton's did. And district-level polls, which showed big problems for Clinton in 16, back up national state polls. Okay. If you're looking for a horse race narrative right now, he writes, you're not going to find it. There was a time when it was easy to imagine this race going much differently. 8 days out, it's much, much harder. I've seen almost enough.
Okay.
By the way, virtually none of this assessment has anything to do with early turnout data, which tells us next to nothing about the vote preference of the final electorate. It's based on a body of polling data that's fundamentally different from 2016's polls. Okay. And then Jonathan Bernstein, a political scientist, writes, Biden is at his peak right now in both the 538 and Economist systems in terms of chances of winning. Who knows? And nothing is ever certain, and maybe we'll get some good Trump polls later today. But it's getting harder to make a plausible case for Trump winning at this point. And Dave Wasserman says, and for those of you, who just can't get over this, let's go back and look at 2016.
No.
Where he's writing November 3rd, 2016, if I were a Democrat, I'd still be more concerned about Michigan, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin than Colorado, Nevada, and Virginia. That's what he wrote on November 3rd, 2016.
No. Okay.
And New Siena, New York 1 poll shows Lee Zeldin winning and Trump ahead 51-38. In other words, the district polling was favoring Trump. And he goes on to say that the momentum is not in Clinton's favor. And so he resurrected some of those quotes from 2016 and said, listen, the bottom line is if you're a Democrat who's into doom scrolling this timeline, sorry, but you're going to have to go back to 4 years because you're not going to find it now.
Okay.
So, this fits in with, of course, what you've heard on this show. This has been an incredibly stable race for months, and there's no reason to think it's going to tighten. It isn't. The question is it going to widen? And, yes. We see some evidence for that, as a matter of fact.
All right.
There's, for example, there's a YouGov poll that was done for University of Wisconsin-Madison, and looking at Michigan and Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, Michigan, I think he's up by 10. And Wisconsin, Biden 53, Trump 44. That's 3 points in Biden's favor from their last poll, and take 2 points, -2 for Trump. So in other words, he's gained 5 points. He went from 5 up to 10 up. But more interesting, Biden opens up a 9-point lead, and thanks to those who have already voted, backing him by 47%, 73 to 26 for those who have already voted in Wisconsin. Trump leads among those who intend to vote on Election Day by 18%, 57-39. And that's a story so far. You can look at Nevada, where John Ralston chronicles it on his early voting blog. You have to build up a firewall. Everybody knows the drill by now. You have to build up a firewall in Clark County. And the Democrats are doing that. And they're ahead of their pace slightly, accounting for increases in population growth. They're ahead of their pace in 2016 when they won that state. So they're banking the early vote. They're doing it in Florida. Nobody knows in any given state, except for Nevada, exactly how many votes you need in order to feel safe. In Nevada, it's 88,000. I mean, Nevada is special because John Ralston.
The Las Vegas line always is a special advantage for Nevada. They can actually pinpoint
But basically, Biden is winning. And then I will offer you this really interesting piece from Joe Wiesenthal from Bloomberg. Okay, in today's Markets newsletter, we're just 8 days away from the election. Let me just read it. And the general expectation remains Joe Biden wins, with a high likelihood of Democrats also taking the Senate. Wall Street analysts, who, by the way, are almost always wrong, Wall Street analysts have been talking about the fiscal implications of this for a while now and have generally come to terms with it, describing how it could be bullish for stocks. Because that's what they do. They try to figure out what's going to happen and then how can I make money off of it. That's their job. Okay, so you have to give them that. On the latest episode of the Odd Lots podcast, Tracy Alloway and I spoke with Josh Younger, a rate derivatives strategist at J.P. Morgan, JPM for those of you in the know, about volatility and hedging going on in the election. And at the end of a fascinating discussion, this is Joe Wiesenthal speaking, Younger identified the one election risk that nobody's really talking about.
Yes.
A huge 1984-style Biden landslide.
Oh. Well,
when talking to clients, he says everybody's roughly of the same frame of mind. Biden will win, but there's a risk of a polling error or some other surprise that Trump still has a shot, and that's what needs hedging, or as you and I like to say, the to be sure paragraph or article that must be written.
Right. To be sure, it must.
The prospect of a polling error in the other direction, whereby the polls are underestimating Biden's victory, doesn't come up in discussions. And since a mega mandate may come with its own distinct policy implications, healthcare, taxes, antitrust, climate, it's perhaps thinking about the tail risk in the other direction and what it would mean for different parts of the market. So once again, and we've said this all along, people are perfectly happy to say Biden's clearly leading, but there's always a chance Trump can win. And nobody says, except us on this show, Biden's clearly leading, but there's also a chance it could be a landslide in the blowout.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're saying it, but it stands to reason. It's funny that that's the one thing that the media won't both sides.
That's Chuck Todd would say.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Because, I mean, after all, Trump is campaigning in Nebraska.
Yeah.
And Biden's campaigning in Georgia.
Right.
And my feeling is if Kamala Harris wants to go to Texas because there's a Texas poll over the weekend that shows Biden up 3 points. Right? If Kamala Harris wants to go to Houston, then, maybe I think it would be a good idea for Trump to really campaign hard in Alabama, Oklahoma, Idaho.
Yes.
Shore up those votes. Make sure he doesn't lose anything there.
Both sides are campaigning in Republican strongholds.
Yeah, pretty much, which tells you an idea of where the race is going on. Folks, it's just about over. I mean, you can 2016 me all you want. The parallels just aren't there. On top of that, the coronavirus stuff is really getting bad, and it's getting bad in rural areas, and it's getting bad in places like Wisconsin. It's not redounding to Trump's, praise and benefit.
No, well, he's terrible at this. Another great reason
and that
to vote
which happens
early.
in Wisconsin matters a lot for the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, and that's why Michigan and Wisconsin are going blue.
Good. It's about time. And remember, another good reason to vote early, even if you're worried about or trying to delay standing in lines because maybe there's a long line where your early voting is going on. Vote early just because you don't. Again, black swan events. Don't get COVID on November 2nd and then realize you can't get out of bed on November 3rd.
Right.
Basic advice.
Polls from today.
Yes.
USC Dornsife, the sine wave poll has stopped being sine wave. It's pretty consistent now. It's between 11 and 13 points for Biden. IBD TIP, which is a tracking poll and had been as low as 2 points, is now up to 7 for Biden.
All right.
Whatever that's worth. There's a poll you never heard of called Public First, which is only adults and came out October 6th through 12th, but came out today as Biden up by 13. SurveyMonkey has been tracking Biden at 6 to 7 over the last few days. Ipsos has him at 8 to 10. Data for Progress has him at 10. Echelon Insights has him at 7. Global Strategy for Navigator has him at 10. So overall, Biden's aggregate is about 9.1. So it's down from his peak of 10.5. So if you want to consider a 1.5 loss of numbers to be narrowing, fine. What it really is Biden was about on October 8th. Well, let's go to the beginning of the month. On October 1st, Biden was 8.2.
Okay.
Hey, people forget that. And then we had the first debate, and it was awful for Trump. And Biden had a bit of a sustained bounce, went as high as 10.5. Now it's down to 9.2 again. So you can consider that just variation of the mean. You can consider that within margin of error. You can consider that a slight bounce from the first debate, which everybody agreed Biden won, and the second debate, which everybody agreed Biden won. And then the bounce is starting to fade, but with a week left, even if it fades completely, it still leads Biden with a big lead. Any way you want to interpret this, there's really no narrowing that you can see. And that's an important point. We have other polling out today. Again, Georgia, University of Georgia has basically a tie. It has Biden 47, Trump 46.
Yes, okay.
And also a similar number for John Ossoff in the David Perdue race. Wisconsin YouGov, Biden plus 8. Pennsylvania YouGov, Biden plus 7. Michigan YouGov, Biden plus 9. In the registered votes, and we went over the Wisconsin big numbers for those who have already voted in that same poll. Wisconsin, Biden plus 9. In the likely voter, whatever that means. And with so many new people voting, I'm not even sure they can do a good likely voter screen.
Well, I guess not. And people voting at all different times. A lot of people who were likely voters yesterday are already voted.
Right, those same YouGov polls have Pennsylvania Biden plus 8. And then Tom Bonner has Texas an incredible 1,855,744 votes. 1.8 million votes have been cast by voters who did not turn out in 2016.
Oh, all right. Wow. Where were you?
These voters are 8 points more Democratic than those who did vote in 2016. Unmarried women make up 1 out of 3 of those surge voters.
Unmarried women. Is that interesting?
Yeah, well, Amy Coney Barrett.
Okay. I guess so. I mean, women.
But also women who care about health for their families. There's a number of things going on here.
I guess, Okay, so
Democratic
I guess
values.
youngish they might skew, but okay.
Well, he says they do.
Yeah.
And so with Biden leading Texas by 3 points in the latest poll from University of Texas, and with numbers like this, Texas is in play. And I'm just saying, to fit in with Wasserman and Jonathan Bernstein and our observation here on the show that things have been stable for months, if a Republican president, incumbent, is campaigning in Macon, Georgia, and worried about Texas, and sees Iowa tied, and looks to see North Carolina tied and Florida tied, that's not good for the Republican incumbent.
Yeah, well, You know, it's
When people are so anxious to go out and vote, they're not voting for the incumbent.
Guess not. Right, that's a change election. If you bring out 1.8 million people who didn't vote last time but could have and show up this time, they're rarely there to say, I'm just here to reconfirm that it was a good idea for me not to vote last time.
Okay, and then let's bring up the other big story. Of course, there's 5 at least Mike Pence staffers who are positive for COVID.
Right, including Mike Pence.
And I think Pence gave it to all of them, but we don't know about that. That hasn't been confirmed.
He's a giver.
We don't know about the fly. The fly hasn't been tested. But the reason that it's important is Pence refuses to quarantine.
Yes.
And he's going to show up tonight for the Amy Coney Barrett vote in the Senate.
Unnecessary, but sure.
Totally unnecessary and risky. Top Senate Democrats to Pence, not only would your presence in the Senate chamber Monday be a clear violation of CDC guidelines, it would also be a violation of common decency and courtesy.
Yeah.
So let's just run on common decency and courtesy, why don't we?
Yes, and throwing things at Mike Pence.
Yeah. Which I think, Mike Pence, Lord of Flies, I think that would be a good thing to do.
Right. You could throw a shoe at him, and if you hit him, there was a fly on your head. He moved, but I was just trying to help out. Perfect excuse.
So
yes.
That's basically the state of the art right now. It's a very good time for being a Democrat. It's a very bad time for being an American because Trump is president and because coronavirus is going wild right now in a way that's going to be really scary. I mean, we're talking about hospitals running out of beds and space and stuff. And staff and all that. Just like we did in April and May in New York, this is happening now in Wisconsin, in El Paso, and in places all over the country. So something very much to keep an eye on.
It's going to be a wild week next week as people are, I think you'll find a couple people carted away in ambulances from lines waiting to vote next week.
We'll do some narrative after the break.
Okay, that's a good time to do it because if we do it now, no one will hear it. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are back after our break. We decided that everything from here on, just to both sides it, so that the media was able to report that both sides are equally bad. We're going to lie for the rest of the show.
Well, one of us is.
Yes, me.
Right, and then you have to figure out which one it is.
Right. Oh, I told them already. Okay.
Yes, but were you lying?
That, right. You don't know.
You don't know.
Right.
Okay, so I was some of the oddball quotes that have come out over the weekend. You may remember a fellow named Denver Riggleman. I think, I have to look it up, but I think he's Virginia 5. And he was primaried by a fellow named Bob Good, and he lost his primary because Denver Riggleman, the Republican, officiated a same-sex marriage, and so a nutball to his right primaried him and beat him. And I think he's running against a really good doctor named Cameron Webb, who is leading by a point or two in a very Republican district, which gives you an idea what's going on in the election as a whole. So vote for Cameron Webb. But Denver Riggleman said today about QAnon people when he was on Meet the Press, these are people who think Lord of the Rings is a documentary. And we're trying to figure out exactly what he meant by that.
Yeah. If anybody has any idea why that makes sense other than they're weirdos, so they think Lord of the Rings is a documentary?
I think somehow, I have to go back and reread it, but in the Second Age, the fall of Numenor must have been somehow associated with kidnapping, Pizzagate, and other things like that. It's the only thing I
Pizza
can
very
figure.
big in Middle Earth. Yeah, I would imagine it had that. I guess equally mysterious. Why was Denver Riggleman on Meet the Press?
Because both sides.
I guess so. I mean, but what side is he? He's not anything. He's not running. He's not on the ballot. He's out.
Well, he was obviously representing Democrats because that's the way Meet the Press does things.
Yeah, maybe
They have
that's
two
it.
Republicans, a Republican-leaning, reporter,
Right.
and then they get somebody like Justin Amash or Denver Riggleman to represent the Democrats.
I mean,
that's how they do it.
I guess so. But it's. I guess I am puzzled just by that. I can't even get past it. Denver Riggleman. I remember him because he's got a
Why do you
wacko
have Jason
name.
Miller or Kayleigh McEnany or
Well,
Hogan
that's
Gidley
true.
or any known liar
Yes.
on Meet the Press when they've lied to your face multiple times? Why
That
do you
is
even ask them
another
on?
separate question. And that, I guess my best answer on their behalf is they are liars, but they are like current and employed liars.
So quote them, but don't have them on the show.
Yeah, well, no, I wouldn't want to have them on the show. But I guess if you were the kind of person that said, well, somebody who has, they're liars, but they're liars of consequence, we can have them on the show. Whereas Denver Riggleman, I don't know whether he might not lie, so that's bad for the show.
Well, if you want to have, representative Republicans, why don't you have 3 Democrats, 2 Democratic reporters,
We'll tell
and
you
then you
what.
can have David Jolly representing the Republicans.
True. It could be
Why
done
don't
the
they
other
do
way.
that? It's exactly what they're doing the other way.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, I can think of so many people who are important to either party who you could have on, as opposed to we'll have. Maybe he's the only one who would agree to go on. He's not campaigning. But surely a senator who isn't up for re-election right now could have done the show. It's a bizarre choice. And okay, well, we got a fun quote out of it.
So, again, I'm going back to the
That's good
roundup.
TV.
But just to try to remember some of the weird stuff that happened over the weekend, here's another weird one. Mark Meadows went on CNN State of the Union.
Okay, we know why.
Or as Jared Yates Sexton, retells it, the chief of staff of the President of the United States went on live television a week out from an election and admitted without pause that the administration is incapable of getting the pandemic under control.
Yes, that feels like it should have been an opener.
Right? Which he did.
Yeah, we're doomed.
Okay.
I am surprised by that. I think everybody was.
Which is pretty good. Here's another, which is pretty odd. You remember the old Manchester Union Leader, which is now called the New Hampshire Union Leader.
Is that right? I did not know that. I remember them, though, yes.
Okay. They're pretty right-wing, but these days, mainstream Republican, the largest newspaper in New Hampshire. And they endorsed.
So?
And for the first time in over a century, they endorsed a Democrat, Joe Biden.
That is something.
But, of course, with an asterisk.
Oh, okay.
They said, our choice is Joe Biden, asterisk. And then under the asterisk it says 162-game season.
All right.
I'll actually read you what the asterisk says.
Yeah.
While Joe Biden is the clear choice for president, it would be a disservice to the country to send him to the White House without a backstop. We suggest splitting the ballot and electing a healthy dose of GOP senators and representatives. The best governance often comes through compromise. The stability of the Biden administration will help foster such compromise, but a blue wave would be nearly as disastrous for this country as 4 more years of Trump. Just in case you don't,
just try it. Though.
Just in case you question their right-wing bona fides.
Yeah.
It would result in a quagmire of big government programs that will take decades to overcome. That's the goal, buddy.
Yeah.
The paper's editorial board, which supported only Republicans for over a century until endorsing Libertarian Gary Johnson in 2016, says Forbes. In other words, not in 100 years.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
We have Donald Trump attacking American doctors. That was one of my favorite.
That sounds
and said they're
funny.
just upping the COVID-19 death count because it makes them richer. It's for money.
Yes, I can see immediately how that would happen. Doctors, the more patients they lose, the more people want to pay them. I think that's
right. Peter Hamby, this is the lightning round stuff for interesting things we otherwise wouldn't mention. One of my favorite journalists. Yeah. Forest, trees, etc. Biden camp pushing into Texas, Trump going to Nebraska, in part to save Iowa, where he won by 9 last time.
Okay.
Or NBC, in the home stretch, signs Trump's hard sell seniors pitch may be falling short. And then the subheader is, I can't do it this time, one older voter who backed the president's first run in 2016 told NBC News, I'm just sick of all this shit.
Hey.
And so I made a little sign, which is like a bumper sticker. I'm sick of all this shit 2020.
Well,
and
that's
I think
a big
basically
seller.
that's the story of the election.
I think so. That would be a bestseller sticker. We really need to get off our butts and print those things already. We could have made a fortune. But that's the story of our life.
And then, according to Election Project, as of October 25th, 9 days until the presidential election, voting is finished. And it's now the 26th. According to Election Project, 57.4 million people have already voted. That's 41.7% of the total vote in 2016.
41.
By midweek here, half of the country will already have voted. Mm-hmm. In the 19 states that report party affiliation, Democrats are outvoting Republicans 49-27.
Yeah,
now, we all know that there's going to be an increase in Republican voting on Election Day. We don't know how much. We don't know how dispirited they are. We don't know who will stay home. And we don't know who's voting for who. That's why when you look at something like Florida and you look at the statistics from Sumner County, for example, which is where the villages are, they're voting pretty heavily, but you don't know who they're voting for. You can look at registration and see registered Democrats, are 57% of the total number of Democrats from that area, and Republicans are a little bit less. But of those Republicans that are voting early, you don't know how they're voting because there have been golf cars for Biden parades there.
Right. Oh, there's a parade. That's solid evidence of something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you do in the villages. It's landlocked, so you don't have boat parades, but you have golf cars.
Right.
That's what they're called, cars, not carts.
Right.
They're
fancy.
Golf cars, parades. So you have competing parades, which try not to crash, and it's always fun at the intersections when they pass each other. But the point is you have Biden support in the villages that you never had for Hillary Clinton. And so just because you have an R in front of your name, just like a panhandle Democrat in Florida, you don't know how they're going to vote. You can't go by just, what the registration is. And, of course, there's the NPAs, no party affiliates, who are also voting fairly strongly or bigly. And therefore, you don't really know how all of that's going to come out. And that's why David Wasserman said you can't go by the early vote except in Nevada. And so we will look at Nevada, but there is, I think, a really kind of semi-important story here from the New York Times by Ben Smith that I think is really worth looking at. And it's the story of how the Hunter Biden stuff fizzled.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And it's called Trump Had One Last Story to Sell. The Wall Street Journal Wouldn't Buy It. Inside the White House secret last-ditch effort to change the narrative in the election and the return of the media gatekeepers.
Oh.
I mean, it's really a insightful look at why this isn't but her emails and how the media have changed. And maybe they have learned something in the last 4 years.
Okay. Oh, and it's a New York Times piece. I was looking at it and saying, Wall Street Journal, I'm not going to be able to read it. But it's just a picture of the Wall Street Journal.
By early October, says Ben Smith in the New York Times,
right,
even people inside the White House believe Trump's re-election campaign needed a desperate rescue mission. Guys, he's been losing for a while, and they know it.
Yeah.
You may not have read that on media, but you heard it here. So 3 men allied with the president gathered at a house in McLean, Virginia, to launch one.
Why not? McLean, that's a nice place.
The host was Arthur Schwartz, a New York public relations guy, close to the president's Trump's eldest son, Donald Jr.
Mm-hmm.
The guests were a White House lawyer, Eric Hirschman, and a former deputy White House counsel, Stefan Passantino, according to 2 people familiar with the meeting. Mr. Hirschman knew the subject matter they were there to discuss. He represented Mr. Trump during the impeachment trial. I love the New York Times. You have to call him Mr. Trump. He's Mr. this, Mr. that. Like
represented him during Mr. Impeachment earlier this year.
Like you're interviewing Michael Cohen.
Mr. Cohen.
Right? I represented Mr. Trump because Mr. Trump did this and this. He did that. He had represented Mr. Trump during the impeachment trial early this year, and he tried to deflect allegations against the president in part by pointing to Hunter Biden's work in Ukraine. More recently, he's been working on the White House payroll with a hazy portfolio listed as a senior advisor to the president, close to Jared Kushner.
Okay.
Right? I told you, this is all a Kushner thing.
It's his fault.
The three had pinned their hopes of re-electing the president on a fourth guest, a straight-shooting Wall Street Journal White House reporter named Michael Bender. They delivered the goods, a cache of emails detailing Hunter Biden's business activities, and on speakerphone, a former business partner of Hunter Biden's named Tony Bobolinsky.
That's the guy. Yeah.
Mr. Bobolinsky was willing to go on record in the Journal with an explosive claim that Joe Biden, the former vice president, had been aware of and profited from his son's activities. The Trump team left believing the Journal would blow the thing open, and their excitement was conveyed to the president. The president went on to tweet, a big story is coming from the Wall Street Journal. I forget the exact wording. Huge. The Wall Street Journal got really pissed when he did that. And what really happened is as the Trump team waited with excited anticipation for a Journal expose, the newspaper did its due diligence. Mr. Bender and Mr. Beckett, its Washington bureau chief, handed the story off to a well-regarded China correspondent, James Aretti, and a Capitol Hill reporter, Mr. Andrew Duren. Aretti interviewed Mr. Bobolinsky. They began drafting the article. Things got messy.
Baba Booey, yeah.
Rudy Giuliani burst on the scene with the tabloid version of the McClane crew's carefully laid out plot. He delivered a cache of documents of questionable provenance to the New York Post, which was a sister publication in the Murdoch chain there.
Oh, right.
Giuliani had been working with the former Trump aide Steve Bannon, who also began leaking some of the emails to favored right-wing outlets. And Mr. Giuliani's complicated claim that the emails came from a laptop Hunter Biden had abandoned and refusal to let some reporters examine the laptop cast a pall over the story, as did the Post reporting, which that's New York Post, which alleged but could not prove that Biden had been involved in his son's activities. So while the Trump team was clearly jumpy, editors in the Journal's Washington bureau were wrestling with a central question. Could the documents prove Joe Biden was involved in his son's lobbying? Or was this yet another story of the younger Mr. Biden trading on the family name? Perfectly good story, but not a new one, or one that needed urgently to be revealed before the election. So Trump wanted the story out by Monday, October 19th. It wasn't coming. They got nervous. Giuliani went to the Post with it because they were afraid the Wall Street Journal wasn't going to do this in a timely manner. The Post screws up the story because nobody trusts anything that the Post said, and it came from Rudy, and that just made it worse. Or as the Times put it, Mr. Bobolinsky got tired of waiting and got spooked about whether they were going to do it or not, Mr. Bannon said. Like he would know.
Yeah, sure. Ask him.
Okay. And then Trump goes on the debate stage, the second one, acts as though the details of the emails and the allegations were common knowledge. You're the big man, I think. I don't know. Maybe you're not, he said to Mr. Biden at some point, a reference to an ambiguous sentence from the documents. Nobody knew what the heck he was talking about. It didn't work. It was a flop.
Yeah.
And then, as the debate ended, the Wall Street Journal does publish, but they publish a brief item, the stub of the reporting, and the core of it was that Mr. Bobolinsky had failed to prove that Biden was involved. Corporate records reviewed by the Wall Street Journal show no role for Joe Biden, the Journal reported.
Oh, well.
And asked about the handling of the story, the editor-in-chief, Matt Murray, said, we don't talk about how we do our rigorous and trusted journalism.
Or the other kind.
And so Ben Smith says, and if you'd been watching the debate but hadn't been obsessively watching Fox News or reading Breitbart, you'd have no idea what Mr. Trump was talking about. The story the Trump team hoped would upend the campaign was fading fast.
Yeah, couldn't tell the story.
And then goes on to say, so that's what happened. That's the historical record.
Well done. Yeah.
Now it gets interesting.
Oh, well, all right. In that case.
Right? That was interesting enough in and of itself. I thought so.
Yes.
But what Ben Smith writes is the McClane Group's failed attempt to sway the election is partly just another story revealing the chaotic, threadbare quality of the Trump operation, a far cry from the coordinated disinformation machinery feared by liberals. But it's also about a larger shift in the American media, one in which the gatekeepers appear to have returned after a long absence. It's been disorienting a couple of decades, after all, with Drudge Report, Gawker. The blog started to tell you what stodgy old newspapers and television networks wouldn't. Social media brought floods of content pouring over the old barricades. This is stuff we're all familiar with, David. I mean, yes. we're a blogger age.
Doing it, all right?
Right? By 2015, the old gatekeepers had entered a kind of crisis of confidence, believing they couldn't control the online news cycle any better than King Canute could control the tides. Television networks all but let Donald Trump take over as executive producer that summer and fall, which they did and which I continue to blame them for. James Comey and Julian Assange seem to drive the news cycles more than the major news organizations. Many figures in old media bought into the idea that in the new world, readers would find the information they wanted to read. Therefore, decisions by editors and producers didn't mean much. Hence, butter emails every single frickin' day for weeks at a time. Culminating with Comey, and that's how Clinton lost the last election, not because she did or didn't go to Wisconsin. Right? But the last 2 weeks have proved the opposite, that the old gatekeepers like the Journal can still control the agenda. Turns out there's a big difference between WikiLeaks and establishment media coverage of WikiLeaks. A difference between a Trump tweet and an article about a Trump tweet. Even between an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal suggesting Joe Biden had done bad things. That was Kimberly Strassel, who nobody should ever trust for anything. I don't know why they even, thought they would. And a news article that didn't reach that conclusion. The news side of the Wall Street Journal shot down, in effect, the opinion side of the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
Which was great. I think we talked about that briefly, but, it was a wonderful thing to see.
Both sides in the Wall Street Journal.
Right. Perhaps the most influential media document in the last 4 years is a chart by a co-director of the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, which I covered in the Pundit Roundup. And the study showed that a dense new right-wing media sphere had emerged, and the mainstream news revolved around the agenda that the right-wing media sphere set. Or as famously put, was it by, what's his name, Mark, it's all good for John McCain. Halperin. Drudge rules our world.
Right. And neither of them are around anymore.
Right.
Okay.
The fact that Mr. Bobulinski emerged not in the pages of the widely respected journal, but in a statement to Breitbart was essentially Mr. Bannon's nightmare and Mr. Benkler's fondest wish, the guy who wrote that study. And a broad array of mainstream outlets, unpersuaded that Hunter Biden's doings tied directly to the former vice president, have kept the story off the front pages and confined to skeptical explanations of what Trump and his allies are claiming. So USA Today didn't want to run my Hunter Biden column this week, the conservative writer Glenn Reynolds complained.
Yeah.
Instapundit, right? Posting, remember him?
A little bit.
The article instead of his blog. President Trump himself hit a wall when he tried to push the Hunter Biden narrative on CBS News. And that's when Leslie Stahl, which we were talking about at the beginning of the show, said, this is 60 Minutes. We can't put on things we can't verify.
That clip I saw, right.
And that's part of why Trump walked out. He was on 60 Minutes to push this, and she wouldn't let him.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason he cut the interview short.
Right. Him saying yes and her saying no.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
So we should have known it, of course. Many of our readers screaming about headlines on Twitter did, and Mr. Trump knew it all along. One way to read his endless attacks on the establishment media is as an expression of obsession, a form of love. And this week you can hear howls of betrayal from people who have for years said the legacy media was both utterly biased and totally irrelevant. And, of course, me adding. And now they're all pissed off because they didn't do what they were told to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And so that's what this piece is about. But let me see if I could find that piece from I don't recall. It may even have been on Saturday's Pundit Roundup. So let me just go see if I can hunt that up.
Yeah. Bobulinski was the guy that showed up at the debate that Trump said he like it was a bombshell. They released. I'm going to bring him as my special.
And nobody
guest.
was interested. So nobody went and saw it.
No one knew what he was, who he was, and then when they heard, they so what? What are you doing here?
Here, I have
they did not lay the foundation for that. There you go. Courtroom procedure lesson for you. You can't if you don't lay the foundation for evidence, it doesn't get entered.
So Berkman Klein had done a review back in January of public discourse in the U.S. 2020 election, and I had quoted it in the Pundit Roundup on Saturday. Oh. And so looking back at January 2020, what they wrote is the biggest change we observe in these first 2 months of 2020 compared to the election cycle of 4 years ago is the degree in which conservative media activists have shaped mainstream media coverage. In 2016, right-wing media activists succeeded influencing mainstream coverage of Hillary Clinton, particularly on the unsubstantiated allegations of wrongdoing associated with the Clinton Foundation. Remember Clinton Cash and how that got into the New York Times?
Yes. Which
exacerbated and fed upon coverage of her emails and fueled suspicion of corruption and dishonesty. Mm-hmm. So they had laid the groundwork with the Clinton Cash garbage, and the New York Times aided and abetted it, which they've never apologized for. It isn't just their daily coverage of but her emails, but the fact that they let Clinton Cash onto their pages. They've never apologized
well,
for that.
that's true. And maybe they blame it on the evidentiary work that Republicans did. But, okay, bad information, bad evidence is bad evidence, even if it is.
Right, and bad predicate and bad foundation. They did all of that. In the current election cycle, conservative media activists rolled out the same playbook that was so successful in 2016 this time, and this is in January. The corruption allegations were focused on Joe Biden, his son Hunter, and their dealings with Ukraine and China. The story was picked up by mainstream media in 2019, but the core allegation fell apart under scrutiny. By January 2020, while conservative media continued to push out exaggerated and false claims, the dominant mainstream framing of the story had shifted to Donald Trump's abuse of his presidential power for his own political gain, which overshadowed the well-established and misguided actions of Hunter Biden to cash in on his father's name. The discredited allegations of corrupt dealings by Joe Biden were getting no play, and while conservative media continues to exhibit a remarkable capacity for reframing news coverage to align with the beliefs and perceptions of its core audience, in January and February 2020, its power to shape mainstream media coverage was diminished compared to 2016. This is the most notable change we observe and has the potential to alter the electoral calculus in the November election. They wrote that in January.
Wow.
Turns out to be true now.
Well, good eye.
So that was really interesting, I thought.
That is interesting. I have seen, that's interesting in particular because of when they were able to reach that conclusion. I've seen of late people pointing this out, and notably, I think, Amanda Marcotte, among others, pointing out she formulated it this way for those who were insisting that impeachment was pointless because we were never going to find the votes in the Senate to actually remove Trump from office. It has had the effect of convincing the media that, one, the corruption is on Trump's side, especially with respect to Ukraine and elsewhere, and two, it inoculated the Biden camp against these charges. It made it impossible to believe the cast of characters that Donald Trump was arraying to make these ridiculous charges against Biden. It was really relying on Ukraine for any of it was poisoned by the narrow focus that we hated so much of the impeachment.
Right.
Articles.
It turned out to be the right move. They made the case, if anybody watched, and even if they didn't, if they read the media coverage afterwards, they made the case that Donald Trump actually did this as president and tried to gin up something against Biden. You don't have to know the details.
Right.
But that narrative is there. They proved it to the American people, whether they got the votes or not. So now the same cast of characters come out and try to make this claim about Hunter Biden, and the American people said, he got impeached for that. It was pretty clear that that's what he was doing. And so why is this new? This isn't new. We already heard this story.
Yeah, and it was wrong of him to try to gin it up, and it turns out that it wasn't true anyway on top of it all. So
that's the benefit of having the impeachment. But the point that I made, and I made it several times over the past couple of months, is I thought the media was doing a much better job, without going into the detail that this public discourse report had in January. But I thought in general they did a much better job than they did at the time of But Her emails. Or if you want to flip that, they did a decent job, reasonable job now, which only gives you an idea of how badly they screwed up in 2016.
Yes. Okay. Because no one's feeling it
was terrible.
A great job.
And when we said at the time it was it really was terrible. And in retrospect, it's even worse.
True. Okay. Yes. Well, refocusing on that. I can never talk about that enough, I think.
Right. But they're not making that mistake this time.
That is good.
Which is one of the reasons why Biden's going to win and Trump is going to lose.
All right. Well, good. We have that.
Oh, and look at that. The hour's up.
Yes, it is. That's true. Well done there. You've done much better than you did in 2016, I think.
I didn't talk as long in 2016?
I think probably if we analyzed it, we would find that was the case. So this is much better. By 2024, this will be your show.
If we went back and looked at 2016, we'd find more instances where Tim Lang, Meteor Blades, was on the show. You had a chance to eat breakfast. I mean, it went well for you, just in a different way.
Right. You'd think I'd be losing weight right now, but no, this is not the case. I don't know.
Those are COVID calories, my friend. Take care, and I will see you on Wednesday.
Yes.
Remember, tomorrow.
All right.
Is Tuesday.
That's what? Yes.
And that means 1 week, 7 days. days before the election
Right.
is over,
All
and
the
the
Republicans
voting is over,
go out,
and the votes started to get counted. So
Okay.
it's getting close to kicking this bum out.
That's when the real stuff starts. Okay, yeah, we're waiting for that. Oh, by the way, you have high praise from Mad Hatter, whose actual Twitter handle, by the way, is Elrond50. Says, "OMG, thanks for the Second Age reference, fantastic." So, very big fan of that reference there. Just thought that you should know that before you go.
Thank
Okay.
you. Well, maybe he'll know, or she'll know
That's
exactly
a good question.
What Denver Riggleman was referring to.
Yeah, we ought to dig into it that way.
Mad Hatter, if you know, give us a clue.
I think it's just.
Look into the Palantir and tell us, please. What the heck is he talking about?
I'd be curious to know.
But don't look too deeply.
Right. Well, I guess not.
Just the general advice. Just don't ever look too deeply into one of those
if there's
stones.
Yeah. If
You
there's
never know what's on the other
any
side.
information about why Denver Riggleman was there at all,
Right.
we'd love to know it. Okay. Very good.
If you look too deeply, Donald Trump will be staring right back at you, and you don't want that.
Right. Ugh. Okay. Well, let's see. I guess that's about.
Or even worse, Putin. You don't want that either.
Oh, right. Well, yeah.
Alrighty, take
Remember when
care,
he used to
and
rear his
I'll talk
ugly
to you
head?
on Wednesday.
Okay, very good. Thanks very much, Greg. Carried us all the way through here. We're about 30 seconds away from starting our music, which puts us a minute away from taking the break. Yeah, we can use that time. I can use that time anyway to try and comb through Pocket, figure out what to go to next. But I think excellent job in rounding up a weird weekend to which I paid almost no attention. That was very helpful. Okay, flash across the screen here from Twitter news, the Twitter news wire telling us just in stocks dropping. It's time for stocks to start trading. Stocks dropping as COVID-19 cases rise and stimulus hopes fade. I think that's all baked into the cake now. No one believes that there would be any sort of stimulus passed in the last week before the election. And of course, it will have no chance to roll it out and feel any impact. So another huge failure and a huge abandonment of responsibility on the part of the incumbent president. Pretty great election strategy. It's working well. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. I'm just sort of keeping an eye on things, trying to see if there's anything of interest to grab from the stories flying by. This sounds like something we've been spending time on here. I'm just trying to see if this is relevant to what we're talking about. Who tweeted this around? John Nichols over at The Nation, tweeting out his latest story. How did he put it? I lost the tweet already, but sometimes the tweets are great summations of what's in the piece here. So here's why it grabbed my eye. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris must play hardball before Election Day. That sounds good. With a clear message that the best way to prevent Trump-inspired chaos after the election is with a decisive result in the presidential and Senate races. And, something we've obviously mentioned here a number of times. I'm curious about whether he has any specifics that we ought to worry about. There's been some great wargaming and journalism surrounding it in the past couple of weeks that I think have prepared us well for some of the worst case scenario shenanigans that could go on after the election. And I think the last one we read was Brian Beutler's, which drew on a number of other people's wargaming and other modeling, trying to figure out what sorts of doors remained for Republicans to try to pry open to contest the result. And that one was, I thought, pretty coherent. And just to remind you of where we were on Friday when we talked about it last, one of the more concrete examples being that down in Florida, where they were, like other places, had put out actual, honest-to-God, official collection boxes for early voting ballots, that the Secretary of State in Florida changed the rules in the middle of the game, as I guess he holds the power to do, declaring that from that point forward, the official rules in the state of Florida would require that these ballot boxes be staffed, that there be official personnel on hand. I don't know to do what, but I guess watch the drop box as though that were something that a camera couldn't do. But it doesn't matter. For the purposes that they're after here, it doesn't make a difference that a camera could do the job just as well. They were going to require, they might as well have required, and maybe they'll change the rules again before next Tuesday, that the person staffing the drop box has to stand on one leg, and it has to be the right leg, so that, why? Just to set up an additional barrier to accepting votes. Here, the idea was, the ballot box has to be staffed by an actual human being, I guess, to prevent fraud, and that a human being would be able to see in ways that a camera somehow would not, that a person arriving with a dump truck full of ballots that all said that they were filled out in the name of Mickey Mouse of Boca Raton, Florida. Actually, Mickey Mouse has probably an actual address in Florida, and it would be in Orlando or Lake Buena Vista, perhaps. But anyway, you get the idea. Florida is unique in this sense. If you're actually talking about filling out ballots for Mickey Mouse, there's a real chance that that Mickey Mouse wields real political power in Florida, but maybe not elsewhere. So any other fake name, whatever it is. But that somehow having a person there would prevent this fraud in ways that having a camera there would not. I don't know. You could make arguments all day long about whether or not that makes any sense. But the point of it was that Republicans would then be able to say, well, you see that the official rules, which the Secretary of State by law in Florida is empowered to make, say that there has to be a person there at all times. And for many days before this rule was made, there was no person there. Now, normal people would say, right. So before the rule was made, there didn't have to be a person there. And so therefore, all of those ballots are perfectly valid. They complied with the rules as they were written at the time. But the Republican plan is to claim, no, well, remember that all of our rules are designed to prevent rampant fraud, which we allege is happening all over the place, but we have never been able to prove. And every time that we're put on the spot and forced to prove it, we fail to prove it, and we have our cases dismissed. But forget all of that. The point here is we decided that there should be this rule in order to prevent fraud. And before there was this rule, there was no way for us to prevent this particular fraud, which we imagine was happening. And so therefore we should assume that it was happening. And therefore we should throw out all the ballots that were submitted before there was a live person on hand to monitor their submission. At which point, of course, people will point out, we can't. How do we know? We empty the box, we put it in a larger box somewhere else, and start counting them. In Florida, we start counting them. In other states, they don't, but they could have the same problem if they're just put in the same crate somewhere to be counted after Election Day. There will be no way to tell which ones were dropped in a drop box that were manned by a person and which ones were dropped in a drop box that were not manned by a person. If you wanted to avoid that confusion, of course, you could have said that the person's role is to put an additional stamp on the outside of the envelope to indicate that they had personally witnessed its processing at the box. But that wasn't the point. They never wanted them to be able to be told apart. The point being here, then you'll say, well, if we can't tell them apart, then the only quote-unquote fair thing to do is, given that many of these votes could have been submitted fraudulently because there was no person manning the mailbox, not that that has anything to do with it, the only thing we can do is throw them all out. And they'll, roll the dice. I don't know if any judges will agree with them, but I guess Trump judges are more likely to agree with them than anybody else. And if you can get one judge somewhere to say, yeah, the only remedy here is to say that all ballots submitted to a drop box are invalid, And who knows what else you could be doing with it, right? You say, if it happens to be the case, how can we tell the difference between votes that were submitted to a drop box and those that were sent back by mail? And usually there's an answer: postmarks, for instance, stamps, etc., things like that. And then I guess, you could try and go a little bit further with it. If it has a stamp on it, but no postmark, as sometimes happens because machines process things improperly. This happens every year with mail-in ballots. Every year, some certain percentage of them, for some reason, don't have a cancellation on the stamp or a postmark or something, and they get thrown out this way because reasons. I mean, at heart, it's, a ballot that comes in by mail is presumed to have been handled properly, and this ballot, we have no idea how it arrived at the office if it hasn't got a postmark, even though we know that many things that arrive through the postal service come without postmarks occasionally anyway. But this is accepted practice. So at any rate, I guess they could then sort through all the mail-in ballots and say anything without a postmark, we don't know the provenance of it. Throw that out too. And in fact, the news has been full of stories about how unreliable and bad the Postal Service has been during the election period. Let's throw out all of those too, if they think that will benefit them. In Florida, it would not. But wherever they thought it might, they will be making this case. And, all it takes at this point is a Trump-appointed judge who just says, to hell with everything. Trump appointed me and I love Trump, and Trump wants this case to come out this way, so it will. And it doesn't matter whether I have any logic or case law behind it. We'll just do it. And if I get overturned, I get overturned. But in the meantime, Trump is asking me for this, and I'm going to give it to him. Let's see what John Nichols thinks might be on the horizon here. The election, he says, isn't over until Trump's gone. That's true. A decisive early win for Joe Biden would help prevent a red mirage. Not certain what that's supposed. Is that like Republican voters holding their votes back until Election Day so that the live vote count makes it look like there's an overwhelming victory for red state, for Republican candidates around the country? Maybe that's it. But Election Day is just a way station on the circuitous route to choosing the next president, he reminds us. Let's see what he's got in store for us here. Donald Trump tells lots of lies. That seems true. Good way to start. But he lies most adventurously about elections. Even when it was clear he had lost the popular vote by millions of ballots and won the Electoral College by a handful of razor-thin margins in battleground states, he claimed on November 27, 2016, that, quote, in addition to winning the Electoral College in a landslide, I won the popular vote, if you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally. I remember that very well. Both statements were false, but Trump was determined to control the narrative, and he has maintained that determination to such an extent that his supporters imagine him to be far more popular than polls have ever suggested. So, what are the chances that an embattled and desperate Trump will try to control the narrative when results of the 2020 election begin to trickle in? Try to control? 100%. What are the chances that he will cry fraud when none exists? What are the chances that he will declare victory even if he's losing? The answer to these questions came on August 17th of this year in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. All right, well, don't speculate then. Just tell us. Where he told supporters, the only way we're going to lose this election, I guess we'll say it maybe in his voice, is if the election is rigged. Remember that. It's the only way we're going to lose this election. He knows that's not true. Yet he has already proved he will seize every opening to foster the chaos, confusion, and legal malfeasance that might allow him to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Don't think it can happen? It already has. Do remember this. In 2000, during the fight over who would win Florida's electoral votes, George W. Bush and his Republican lieutenants fostered the illusion that he was the winner in waiting in the days following a too-close-to-call election. He formally declared victory on November 26th that year, at a point when Democrats were legitimately contesting the results. 12 days later, Florida's Supreme Court ordered a manual recount that might have confirmed an Al Gore victory if it had not been upended the next day by a Bush-friendly majority on the U.S. Supreme Court. And, of course, we'll have a Trump-friendly majority this time. Even though avenues existed for fighting on, Karl Rove and the Bush team were so successful in conjuring fantasies of Bush's inevitability and legitimacy that Gore conceded in what looked like a hostage video. Trump may not be interested in history, but rest assured that he and his aides are well aware of the maneuvers that gave Bush the presidency. The real issue in 2020 is whether the Democrats will give Trump the space to dictate the story of November 3rd and what comes after. To address it, let's deal in something the president eschews: facts. November 3rd, this is, I guess, the first fact, is just a way station on the circuitous route to choosing the next president. December 14th, 2020 is the day the Electoral College votes. On January 6th, 2021, a joint session of Congress counts the electoral votes, and if there are no objections, the winners of the presidency and vice presidency are formally announced. If Democrats Joe Biden and Kamala Harris prevail, and if Vice President Mike Pence, as the president of the Senate, announces the name of Trump's successor on that day, the pieces will be in place for the peaceful transition of power on January 20th. Still a bit of an assumption, but okay. I mean, you could just have a lunatic Trump say, "To hell with you, Pence. I'm not going." I don't know how well that works, though. But the vagaries of the Constitution and the statutes that extend from it leave enormous openings for what is insufficiently described as mischief. Nothing in Trump's history suggests that he will respect norms that do not benefit him, and this has led to widespread speculation about the lengths to which he might go to keep the presidency. Trump has clearly signaled one of the routes he'll take, starting with objecting to voting by mail. Of course, you know all about that. Maybe we'll skip some of these paragraphs then, and who knows, maybe all of it we've heard before. 58% of likely voters plan to vote early or by mail. We do note that. In the roughly 20 states that allow ballots postmarked on or around November 3rd to be counted if they arrive after Election Day, including battleground states such as Iowa, Minnesota, Nevada, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, and perhaps Wisconsin, results may not be known for a week or more. We've heard this, but it's a good reminder. Even with recounts of close states, that's plenty of time to meet the Electoral College deadline. Unfortunately, it's also plenty of time for Trump to engage in bad faith maneuvers, throwing a divided country into chaos. How? Democrats are more enthused about voting by mail than Republicans. For instance, in Wisconsin, a Marquette University Law School poll in August found that of people who said they'll vote by mail, 81% supported Biden and 14% favored Trump. Among those who planned to vote in person on Election Day, 67% supported Trump versus 26% for Biden. We've known about this for a while, and of course, I just remind you today that with coronavirus raging, and a week still left to develop the symptoms, it's entirely possible that the 67% of people who plan to vote on Election Day who support Trump and who therefore will say eschew mask wearing and other safety measures, there's some significant portion of that cohort who planned to vote on Election Day who may find themselves too sick to do so. On the other hand, there's also probably a large number who will find that though they are obviously sick, they will get in line anyway. And so it's a very good idea to vote early just to avoid that. There will be a lot of people who are obviously ill, but who will say, "I said I would crawl across broken glass to vote. I don't have to do that." But hacking and coughing on other people, especially to take revenge on them for not being mask haters and Trump supporters, sure, I would love to both vote and cough on other people and give them COVID. So watch out for them. The fact that in-person votes will shape the early results, though, creates the prospect, according to data and technology firm Hawkfish. I don't know why them, but that a red mirage could emerge on election night at a point when most ballots remain uncounted. Trump could lead nationally and in critical battleground states. We can anticipate that the president and at least Fox News likely, but many others, are going to declare victory at that point. Ellen Konar, Hawkfish's vice president of voter research, told USA Today they're not going to say, "Oh, let's hold off. We don't have all the ballots in." All right. Well, we've heard quite a bit about that, although there's a little bit of specifics we'll throw in there. One hawkfish scenario: Trump could enjoy a projected electoral college count of 408 to 130 on election night, with under 20% of the votes counted, only to see Biden eventually win 334 to 204. If the final margin's that wide, Trump's gambit may simply embarrass the president and his gullible supporters. But what if it's closer? Or, actually, the bigger the gap is, the more vehemently he'll insist it was fraudulent, I guess. But what if it's closer? What if key states require arduous recounts? Then Trump's lies get traction. Trump could claim headlines, dominate social media, and deliver his victory speech at the start of a process that's destined to turn against him. And in so doing, he wouldn't just create a false impression. He would open space for the same Republican legal teams that worked to make it hard to vote before the election, to make it hard to count votes after the election. With objections to non-existent voter fraud, he could give allies encouragement to disrupt and discredit the ongoing count. Remember the old Brooks Brothers riot down in Florida. This is what sets up a potential disaster, tweeted David Axelrod. You know him, of course, from the Obama campaign. With Election Day voting favoring Trump and mail-in voting favoring Biden, we could see Trump claiming fraud as the count turns against him. One other reminder, as they said, we could see the same Republican legal teams that work to make it hard to vote before the election, make it hard to count votes after the election. The additional factor here is that we could see the same legal teams that worked to make it hard to count the votes in Florida in 2000 after the election will be sitting on the bench as the judges in the cases in which current Republican legal teams will be working to make it hard to count the votes after the 2020 election. And 3 of them sit on the Supreme Court right now. So that's pretty big danger. This is where Republican legislatures and conservative courts could advance Trump's agenda, the article continues. But as I'm looking at this, I'm trying to think of what, if any, I don't see any place where the thinking diverges from anything that we have gone over before. It's a good warning and a well-written article. Good for people who are playing catch-up, I think, at this point, or may have missed some of these discussions earlier. But I think we're probably better served at this point in noting that there will be a lot of people reading this for the first time, and you'll be able to have that discussion along with them because we've really pretty much hit the highlights of all of this stuff already. So we're ahead of the curve on this particular John Nichols piece. Let's see, other issues that we can turn our attention to. There are many. Let's grab this one, just because I think this one could percolate up during this week. And it was brought to our attention by Rebecca Romans, Lambs and Beds, who tweeted to us this interesting bit. I had grabbed it already. We were on the same page, Rebecca and I, for Citizens for Ethics. That's the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, or CREW, folks, who put this report and release together in, I'm sure, the hopes that the mainstream media would pick it up, and we'll see whether that happens. Hasn't so far, but I imagine we'll be reading stories about this by this afternoon and then reading them again tomorrow on the show. The Mystery of President Trump's Consulting Fee Income, a report put together by CREW's Meredith Lerner, and a couple days old now already, October 21st, and still just coming to our attention. What would he be getting here? President Trump's continued ownership of his business empire while in office has raised a flood of ethical and security concerns that stem from his unprecedented blend of personal profiteering and public service. His near-constant travel to and promotion of his businesses, along with large payments from special interests and foreign governments, have created thousands of conflicts of interest and undercut his claim that he has not been involved with the Trump Organization since becoming president. I think we all felt that was true. Now, add to that unethical stew a new discovery. President Trump reported being paid consulting fees by the Trump Organization during his second year in office. I don't even have any idea why he would do that, right? Quite honestly, I mean, in addition to it being obviously wrong to do so, I guess I don't know why someone like him doesn't just leave it off. Why not just lie and say, you discover it? And if you do, I'll lie and say it didn't happen, or do whatever I have to do to avoid responsibility for it. But I am sometimes curious about why he offers these things up. But okay, we'll stick to the facts as Meredith lays them out here. The mere fact that a president might be engaged in for-profit consulting on the side is cause for concern. The presidency is arguably the most demanding job in the world and requires anyone who holds it to have a single-minded focus on what's in the best interest of the American people, not their personal financial interests. Again, arguably, I guess is all we can say. That's what we always assumed was happening. But Donald Trump says, you can't make me. And we realize, yeah, we have no laws that actually can make you do that. Well, none that are being applied anyway. Beyond that, however, the fees raise new questions specific to Trump about how involved he is with his business, and, in light of the recent New York Times reports about his tax returns, to what extent the payments might demonstrate his continued attempts to use questionable means to lower the Trump Organization's tax burden. Last year, Trump disclosed $61,045 in consulting fees that are apparently related to Trump Organization projects that never materialized in his financial disclosure report covering 2018. Again, why bother? If you're a committed liar, why bother? The payments are unusual because they are the only one of their kind that Trump has reported since becoming president. And unlike his more passive forms of profit from his business, the use of the term consulting seems to imply actual services rendered by the president. Even if Trump did not provide consulting services in exchange for the fees, the question remains as to why the income was designated as consulting fees. It is impossible to draw a conclusion about that based on the financial disclosure alone, but the answer could lie in last month's bombshell New York Times report, which described the Trump Organization's practice of writing off consulting fees as business expenses in order to reduce the Trump Organization's tax burden. And I recall that a lot of what ends up in Ivanka Trump's pocket is explained away as consulting fees very often, as opposed to her just straight salary from the Trump Organization. Anyway, before he assumed office, Trump assured the public that he would not be involved with the Trump Organization's operations. We all know about that. While serving as president, it was a lie. Despite maintaining an ownership interest in the company. Of course, while there's plenty of evidence that Trump has picked away at the so-called firewall between the presidency and the Trump Organization, it would be remarkable if, as the consulting fees suggest, Trump was paid for services he performed for the company while he was president. The financial disclosure, which covers 2018, is the only one he has filed since becoming president that reveals income from consulting fees. So either he was lying as we suggested he should all those other times, or suddenly he's telling the truth for some reason. Now, okay, where did these fees come from? They were paid to him through an entity called 4T Holdings 2 LLC. 4T, number 4T, Holdings TWO LLC. So there's a 4T Holdings somewhere else, and I don't know whether that's 4 Trumps, the 3 of his older kids plus him is my guess. According to the disclosure, the LLC owns 2 entities, one of which appears to relate to a plan for the Trump Organization to build a development with Kushner companies on the Jersey Shore that was scrapped in June of 2018. The other is linked to a management deal between the Trump Organization, and another hotel brand to develop a hotel in Mississippi. A note on the financial disclosure filed by Ivanka Trump affirms that connection. The Trump Organization abandoned its plan to develop the hotel, the first of its budget Scion line. Remember that? I recall them breaking that story that was going to happen back in February of 2019. We'll squeeze in a little bit here, a little more on our run-up to the break. Ivanka Trump also has an interest. Oh, I've got the wrong, only 1 minute music running here. So, all right, I guess we'll just run it again in the middle of the break. Ivanka Trump also has an interest in 4T Holdings 2 LLC, but she arranged to receive fixed payments related to her interest in its parent company after she started working at the White House in order to avoid a situation in which her income would depend on the company's performance. President Trump did not make a similar arrangement. Wow, he's dumb. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. And, all right, we're going to have to sort of play out or fade down our music. This is a good opportunity to do it here as it fades already. Okay, just to re-engineer things after hitting, once again, the wrong button. There should really be some sort of safeguard on this stuff. But that's the consequences of trying to squeeze in a little extra verbiage from the consulting fees story. Also, I'm looking ahead at the same time to what else I might be able to include in our final segment. Let's get through this story so that we can see developments as they blossom and as they begin to be reported in the traditional media. After I think we'll see probably some extra coverage of this. Where we left off, of course, Ivanka had made some arrangements for fixed income payments from 4T Holdings 2 LLC that Donald Trump did not. The story continues here. While there is only one reported payment for consulting fees in Trump's financial disclosures, he also reported more than a dozen payments totaling millions of dollars for management fees in 2018 alone. It is unclear what distinguishes the consulting fees Trump reported from the management fees in his financial disclosures. One possible explanation for the consulting fee payments is that the president provided consulting services to the Trump Organization while serving as president, contrary to his pledge to stay out of his company's operations. But as last month's New York Times article showed, there are maybe reasons to characterize payments as consulting fees, even if Trump himself wasn't a consultant. So a little bit of fraud just to avoid some taxes, which usually lands people in trouble. But I guess not while you're the sitting president. While $61,045 is a small amount of money compared to the income Trump has generated from some of his other assets, would be a year's worth of income for many of the rest of us, designating, if you're lucky, designating the income as consulting fees may be part of a larger pattern to benefit the president financially. In its report, The Times describes how President Trump may have reduced his company's tax burden by writing off $26 million in consulting fees, I would have put that in scare quotes, as business expenses. The newspaper added that in some of those cases, people with direct knowledge of the projects were not aware of any outside consultants who would have been paid. As I recall, this was one where they were paying Ivanka as a consultant on something, and then therefore saying, well, it's consulting fees paid by the company, so that's a business expense, not salary that we pay to Ivanka Trump for being an executive and a director at the company, but rather payment for her consulting, which is a cost of our doing business and therefore deductible, which is highly questionable. The Times points specifically to the financial disclosure report that Ivanka Trump filed when she started working at the White House, which revealed that the income she received from a consulting company, while she was also a Trump Organization employee, exactly matched consulting fees claimed as tax deductions by the Trump Organization for hotel projects in Vancouver and Hawaii. President Trump's tax returns covering 2018, which might reveal whether the consulting fees Trump reported in his financial disclosure were part of an effort to reduce the Trump Organization's tax burden, have not been made public. Until then, Trump's consulting fee income remains a mystery. But it's an interesting mystery all by itself in that even if it turns out somehow to be on the up and up, it's bad news because he should have been busy being president at the time and not consulting for anyone, least of all the business from which he has pledged to separate and not accept emoluments while in office. Wow. Okay. Many other fun stories to share. And additional installments in the ongoing New York Times analysis of his tax returns and the tax information that they've gotten a hold of, including some, I'm sure, very entertaining stories under the headline of Trump's Philanthropy, Big Tax Write-Offs and Claims That Don't Always Add Up. Feels like the sort of story that'll take longer than our final segment to get through, though. And perhaps we'll save that for another day and read instead some of the smaller items and which cumulatively I think could easily use up, well, probably a whole show also by themselves. But we'll see what we can squeeze in. Let's see. Some of the here's one that was fun / make you want to smash your head against your desk, and you've likely heard this one. And I think we had the chance to include it in Friday's show and just missed the opportunity because of so many of the other crazy stories that we had. Did you hear this one? The Guardian reporting Trump's Twitter account was hacked. It says here after a Dutch researcher claims he guessed the password, according to some report somewhere, I guess in a Dutch newspaper. Victor Gevers, Gevers, guessing at that pronunciation, claimed he had access to the president's account, according to the report in the Dutch newspaper De Volkskrant. Volkskrant. I think we've actually cited them as a source before. Anyway, Twitter, though, I guess, is denying it. Twitter says we've seen no evidence that this was the case, although I don't know what kind of trail it would leave behind if he guesses the guy's password and then doesn't do anything with it. I guess he considers himself something of a white hat hacker because he apparently warned the president and the people around him and the Secret Service and the CIA, for that matter, of the fact that his password was now in his hands. The kicker of the story is how dumb the password was and how essentially how easy it was to guess. And it's the sort of thing, actually, it makes me kick myself. Like, why didn't I spend any time trying to hack the president's password if it was that easy? I would love to have done it, although I guess it would have made me very nervous if I had, if I'd scored here, and I guess there's every indication that I might have if I had even given it a moment's attention. I would have thought that the Secret Service would come and arrest you or something. So I guess the protection of being Dutch, perhaps, not that they would be held entirely unaccountable, but at least there's some layers between you and the Secret Service if you're doing this from the Netherlands. Anyway, the way I told the story here, if you haven't heard it, and I imagine there are very few of you who haven't at this point, you could make a game of it. If you know somebody else who hasn't heard it, you can ask them. I'll give you 5 guesses, because I think that's apparently how many it took him to get this right, what the president's Twitter password is. By the way, this being reported in The Guardian, as I mentioned, by Adam Gabbatt. I'm guessing at his pronunciation too, Gabbatt. I don't know. Do we read the whole story, or do I just give you a long story short here? The Twitter account that was allegedly hacked last week, which was, it says in the story, which would be the week before last, I guess now, after a Dutch researcher correctly guessed the president's password. What was it? Does everybody know by now? MAGA 2020 ! Exclamation point. That's an extra character in there. And I don't know whether that was one he threw in or whether Twitter now tells you, put in a special character. I think we actually read an article once about why putting in special characters is actually less secure than not requiring special characters, because there's only a limited number of special characters. If everyone's required to have one, hacking out that special character is actually a lot easier than hacking out the rest of it if you're just plain guessing. But you don't have to do a lot of guessing. If his Twitter password, oh my God. Thankfully, he doesn't know anything, so very rarely will he be sharing anything of national security significance on his Twitter account. And one, tweets are short, so you can't give away too much information. Two, he'll get it wrong. And three, he doesn't know any of this stuff, so I guess we were okay there. But the bigger national security implication being that a bad actor could get a hold of his password and claim to be declaring war over Twitter, and we would never know for sure whether it was serious or not. But that points to a larger problem, not Twitter's problem necessarily, which is that Trump is crazy and unstable, and nobody can ever be sure whether what he's saying is something. One, whether he's saying it. Two, whether he's serious. Three, whether he ought to be taken seriously in saying it. Or four, whether he's just having a psychotic episode, or the steroids are making him say it, or no one knows what. I guess the additional kicker of the whole thing, is this is the second time that Victor Gievers, if that name is correct, has guessed Trump's password. Apparently, during the 2016 election, he did the same thing back when, and you see what's going on here, like MAGA 2020 ! That's, his current catchphrase, although I'm sure he probably also tried KAG 2020, Keep America Great, as they sometimes use as their slogan now. But back in 2016, you want to guess at what his password allegedly was then? The answer is, "You're fired," which was, of course, his catchphrase from The Apprentice. And back then, you didn't need a special character, and I don't think it ever accepted apostrophes, so he just spelled it without the apostrophe. Although I'm pleased to report that Trump did spell it with Y-O-U-R-E as opposed to Y-O-U-R, which I thought might have been the case. So if you want to have some fun over the next week, I should have done this story on Friday, so you could have spent the weekend trying to guess his new password. Because apparently Trump also had refused, at least to that point, to also set up the two-factor authentication, right, backup. So in the time that this researcher spent trying to guess his password, there were no notifications given to Trump or anyone on his team that someone had obtained his password or was trying to get it, and no word on whether that's been set up yet. So I think it's a bad idea to spend your time doing this if you're American and subject to the jurisdiction of the Secret Service. Elsewhere, I would say it's probably also a bad idea, except it's an awfully funny story. We'll see whether it pans out and whether or not this guy's story ends up getting debunked by Twitter. But it's a good one anyway, and fun to do, and awfully stupid on the part of the president, and so therefore very easy to believe. All right. That seemed like it was worth spending some time on. Let's see. Other interesting items. Let's hop around a little bit here. Also in coronavirus news, in addition to all the people in Mike Pence's office and possibly Mike Pence himself getting coronavirus, another prominent-ish figure, if you can call the Alabama lieutenant governor prominent enough to report on, he too has tested positive for COVID-19, I guess for purposes of being almost reporter-like or whatever. We'll go find out what that guy's name is. It is Will Ainsworth, Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth, Republican, of course, of Alabama, letting everybody know last week that he had tested positive for coronavirus. That's about the extent of my interest in what the Lieutenant Governor of Alabama is up to, though. Let's see, jumping around a little bit more. Here's an interesting one. Speaking as we had been earlier of the idea that Florida was manning its ballot drop boxes, we have this somewhat similar and related information from the New York Times reported on October 22nd, last week, by Danny Hakim and Nick Corasaniti. Do I have anything close to the right pronunciation here? You let me know. Trump campaign draws rebuke for surveilling Philadelphia voters. They're spying on the campaign. So I'm going to do that now. President Trump's campaign has been videotaping voters at ballot drop boxes, I guess several, a tactic that could amount to illegal voter intimidation, Pennsylvania's Attorney General says. Very interesting. And I guess, therefore, also proof that you can, in fact, man these, or surveil or supervise activity at these drop boxes without a live person having to be there, as demonstrated by the Trump campaign itself. So yeah, the Trump campaign in Philadelphia has been videotaping voters while they deposit their ballots in drop boxes, leading Pennsylvania's Attorney General to warn last week now, of course, that the campaign's actions fall outside of permitted poll watching practices and could amount to illegal voter intimidation. What are they going to do about it? Complain, probably. The campaign made a formal complaint. See, there you go. I was thinking people would complain and the Pennsylvania Attorney General would complain. But guess what? Caught red-handed, the campaign complained. Complained to city officials on October 16th, saying a campaign representative had surveilled voters depositing 2 or 3 ballots at drop boxes instead of only their own. The campaign called the conduct blatant violations of the Pennsylvania Election Code, according to a letter from a lawyer representing the Trump campaign that was reviewed by the New York Times. The campaign included photos of 3 voters who it claimed were dropping off multiple ballots. And they may or may not have an actual point here. I am not familiar with Pennsylvania's election code, but it wouldn't surprise me if it were the case, as it is, I think, in many states, that no one is allowed to handle your ballot in any way other than you and, if it's a mail-in ballot, the Postal Service. The postal employees are the only people besides election workers and you who are supposed to do anything with your ballot, and they can be very strict about these things, including stuff as dumb as, and this is why it happens all the time, people regard it as a dumb restriction. I have filled out my ballot. I intend to go put it in the mailbox or the drop box, depending on how I want to return my ballot. And you, my friend from down the street or next door or in the next dorm room over, if we're college students, have likewise done the same and are on the way to the box to do this same job for themselves. And they say, I will do you the favor of dropping that off. Or they might ask, would you go? I'm very busy. I'm studying for an exam. Or I am disabled and I have difficulty getting to the box. Whatever it is. I just don't feel like it. I'm an extremely lazy person, and I notice you're going to the mailbox. Would you carry this there and drop it in the mailbox for me? And for most people, it doesn't occur to them that there's a problem with it. One, because why would there be? The ballot is signed and sealed and secure, just as it's supposed to be. It's secured against any kind of tampering in the mail system, where people will handle it. And I mean, anybody could tamper with anything, but these are the ballots are designed to make it evident when such tampering has happened. But just to be triple, quadruple sure that no one tampers with it, it's apparently, in most places, against the law for anyone else to handle it, including your friend, your neighbor, your spouse, your siblings, whatever, even after it's all sealed up, to just drop it in the mailbox for you. So, of course, I'm sure that they thought, well, if we videotape enough of these drop boxes, we will find people doing that, because people don't realize that that's a rule. Even though very often in the instructions it's very explicit about that. Don't let anyone else handle your ballot. But it's also unclear, because in some states it's okay to do that under certain circumstances. In some states it's okay to do that if you fill out the additional affidavit that comes with the ballot that says someone will be handling these things for me. That's the usual allowance that they make for very often for disabled people or others who have some other valid excuse for why they can't or won't be bringing the ballot to the box or the mailbox by themselves. And if you don't fill one of those out, it can be a problem. And I guess Republicans figured they would catch enough people and be able to complain. So there they go. They are complaining. This must be stopped. a local lawyer for the Trump campaign, Linda A. Kearns, wrote in this complaint letter, adding that the actions undermine the integrity of the voting process. Of course, Republicans do this too. The unofficial campaign drop boxes in California that the Attorney General of California insisted the Republicans stop using, but then they said, we're not going to stop using it. And then the state, apparently for whatever reason, said, oh, well, I guess they're just not going to. And they backed off of the threats that they issued. I mean, somebody other than an official election worker or a postal service employee is handling those ballots. Those too should be under scrutiny. And that might even be the design of the system, as it turns out later on. It's something we speculated on earlier in the show. But apparently no one drawing parallels between this and that at this point, unless it appears later in this article. Both the Trump and Biden campaigns are focused on Pennsylvania, seen as one of the most important swing states in the election, and where polls showed Joe Biden with a 7-point lead. And that must be why they're focusing on Pennsylvania and not California. They figure that one's a lost cause. The Trump campaign's aggressive strategy in Philadelphia suggests its aim is to crack down on people dropping off ballots for family members or anyone else who is not strictly authorized to do so. Ms. Kearns demanded that the names of all voters who had used the drop box in front of Philadelphia's City Hall on October 14th be turned over to the campaign, and insisted that the city station a staff member around every box at all times. She also asked for footage from municipal cameras around City Hall. But city officials rejected the assertion that the voters who had been photographed had necessarily done something improper. The city's lawyers forwarded the campaign's complaints to the local district attorney, but did not make a formal referral and cast doubt on the assertions. They also said they don't track which voters use which drop boxes, and so therefore I'm sure later on the Trump campaign will say all drop box ballots have to be invalidated, like we were discussing earlier. Third-party delivery is permitted in certain circumstances. Benjamin H. Field, a deputy city solicitor and counsel to the City Board of Elections, wrote in a letter sent to Ms. Kearns on Monday, "The board cannot agree with your conclusion on the basis of the information you provided, nor can the board, in exercising its duties, assume that an individual is violating the election code when that person can act as an agent for a voter who required assistance." In other words, you can't tell from the footage whether they are dropping off their own ballot plus one or two more that include the necessary affidavit authorizing this person to drop those ballots off after all. They're just assuming that that affidavit doesn't exist and wasn't included when you can't tell from the photo. They just want to make trouble. Under Pennsylvania law, voters are allowed to deliver only their own ballots to drop boxes unless they are assisting a voter with a disability or who otherwise needs assistance. But voting has been upended by the pandemic, and many voters are unfamiliar with the rules around drop boxes, which they may be using for the first time. Earlier this month, a Trump campaign official told the Times that the campaign would be videotaping drop boxes, but was only interested in people who were dumping large numbers of ballots, not in those bringing an extra ballot or two. But guess what? That assertion appears to have been false. Boing. Surprise. The Trump campaign's October 16th letter described 3 voters who had been videotaped by a Trump campaign staff member. One was wearing a striped baseball cap and deposited what appeared to be 3 separate ballots. Another voter was a woman wearing a face mask and a long sweater jacket over a yellow shirt who appeared to put 3 ballots into the drop box, while a woman with gold bangles dropped off what appeared to be 2 ballots. My goodness, and great descriptions at that. They need to hire better people than that. We believe these people to be just the tip of the iceberg. Dramatic music, of course, necessary for that. Just the tip of the iceberg, which is also melting, by the way, and rising sea levels. I just thought we should throw that one in there. Without reasonable checks, this behavior continues unabated and with impunity. Her letter aligns with a broader strategy by the campaign to amplify relatively minor voting issues to bolster baseless claims by the president that the election is rigged by Democrats against him. The Dropbox issue could also factor into any challenges brought by the campaign after the polls close on Election Day. The campaign has paid particularly close attention to Philadelphia. Its Election Day operations across the country are led by Michael Roman, a Philadelphia native who cut his teeth in city politics and who made numerous public statements seeking to undermine public confidence in the election, as has President Trump. Mr. Roman previously ran a secretive operation for the billionaire brothers Charles and David Koch that surveilled and gathered information on liberal adversaries. In a statement to the Times, the Pennsylvania Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, excoriated the campaign's tactics. Pennsylvania law permits poll watchers to carry out very discreet and very specific duties. Videotaping voters at drop boxes is not one of them. Mr. Shapiro, a Democrat, said, "Our entire system of voting is built on your ballot being private and your choice to vote being a personal one. Depending on the circumstance, the act of photographing or recording a voter casting a ballot could be voter intimidation, which is illegal." The tables perhaps turned, eh? In a statement, Thea McDonald, a spokeswoman for the Trump campaign, said, "It is categorically absurd to say that filming a drop box, especially when news outlets do the same, is voter intimidation." President Trump fought and won to protect voters and make sure ballot harvesting remained illegal in Pennsylvania. It is the height of hypocrisy that Democrats in the mainstream media first claim there is zero evidence of illegal voting and then cry foul when Republicans transparently provide evidence. Except you're not supposed to do it that way. You could make a personal observation. No one would believe you. That's why you brought the camera, but the camera's a problem. Okay. On Friday, Kathy Boockvar, the Pennsylvania Secretary of State, said during a briefing that the Trump campaign's tactics were a concern. "We have been in touch with law enforcement on this issue," Ms. Boockvar, a Democrat, of course, said, adding, "Voter intimidation is illegal under state and federal law, and videotaping you, taking pictures of you without your consent, is part of that." Jane Rowe, a spokeswoman for the Philadelphia District Attorney, Lawrence Krasner, said in a statement that the office is committed to investigating any and all allegations of voter intimidation and harassment, and expected that any organized efforts from campaigns will fully comport with Pennsylvania law. Well, these don't. And certainly, if dropping off 2 or 3 ballots without affidavits is a technical violation, sure, so be it. But if videotaping and taking pictures of people dropping off ballots is likewise a technical violation, then so be it. Why one would count and the other would not is just plain gimmitarianism and not to be countenanced. The Dropbox episode is not the first time the Trump campaign has clashed with Philadelphia officials. Let's find out more about this. Last month, campaign representatives tried to enter a satellite election office in the city in an attempt to monitor with their cell phone cameras voters picking up and filling out mail-in ballots. Philadelphia election officials barred them from entering, saying that laws permitting citizen poll watchers referred only to polling locations and that a satellite election office was not a polling location. Matthew Morgan, the Trump campaign's counsel, rejected this line of reasoning in a recent interview. "They say this is not a polling place," he said. "To us, this sounds absurd when you can register, get your ballot, and vote in that location, so we don't accept that premise." Closer. The Pennsylvania law also requires poll watchers to be registered, which is a bigger deal, trained and certified, and in a recent video produced by Republican Party officials to help train poll watchers in Pennsylvania, a narrator explicitly states, "Remember, in Pennsylvania, poll watchers must observe the vote in a manner that will not obstruct the rights of any voter." And we already learned that putting a camera on them does that. None of the officials from the Trump campaign who tried to monitor satellite election offices last month had certification. So there you go, open and shut on them. The campaign is currently suing the city, though, to be allowed to station poll watchers in satellite election offices. This is not the first time the Trump campaign has sought to use photographs of voters dropping off 2 or 3 ballots in Pennsylvania as evidence of widespread fraud or criminal activity as well. Wow. And it does go on here. Let's add a little bit more before closing things out. Earlier this year, the Trump campaign filed a lawsuit in the Western District of Pennsylvania in an attempt to halt state election offices from using drop boxes at all, for the general election. As evidence, the campaign provided photographs and video stills of 7 people returning more than 1 ballot to drop boxes in Philly and Elk counties during the primary this year. Although those pictures were not taken by the campaign, lawyers involved in the case said. Instead, they were culled from municipal security cameras, newspaper articles, and social media. One of the pictures Republicans highlighted showed a black man wearing a hat and a sweatshirt. Wow. Bearing the logo of the Philadelphia water utility, who was photographed putting 2 ballots in a drop box. In another photograph, a black woman, again, gee whiz, wearing Nike sneakers and a plaid shirt, was shown depositing 2 ballots in a drop box. A white man finally caught in a third photograph from an Instagram post, appearing to be holding up 2 ballots near a drop box, but it's not clear whether he's the only voter present. That's true, too. The Trump campaign lost that lawsuit, with the judge dismissing the photographs, noting that it is undisputed that during the primary election, some county boards believed it was appropriate to allow voters to deliver ballots on behalf of third parties. So I guess it was okay then, and we'll wrap things up at this point and hand them off to Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Next.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
So, no surprise, the Philadelphia evidence appears to be incomplete and unverified, and I guess we'll be seeing this in a lot of states coming in from, we only have a week left to see these things, but I guess we'll see them probably pop up after the election in states that the Trump campaign appears to be losing. Wow. Okay, we'll follow up with this story and more